Welcome to our December webinar for the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition in partnership with the National Association of Catholic Chaplains. I'm Father George Williams, and I'm happy to introduce our panel of three men who are very expert on this matter of certification for prison and detention ministry. First, we have David Lichter, who is the Executive Director of the NACC, the National Association of Catholic Chaplains. We also have with us Dr. Mark Delmonico. He is currently the Assistant Director responsible for certification and ecclesial ministry for the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops. And his job is to promote, encourage, develop, and evaluate new and ongoing processes of certification in the United States. And finally, we have Harry Dudley, who retired recently as the Assistant Director for Certification and Ecclesial Ministry. So he has many years of experience working with lay ecclesial ministry and the certification process for that. So go ahead, David. Welcome and good morning, all of you.
Thank you, Father George. We're delighted to be with everyone today. In August, Harry and I had actually done a presentation on some of the early developments, and today we hope to take you a little bit more in depth on some of the details around what we've been doing related to the area of developing formation and certification, and we'll go into that. But thought first we could just pause for a moment and give our time over together to the Lord during this Advent season. So I'd invite us to take a moment to pray. This is actually a little excerpt taken from Pope Francis's homily this past Sunday. And so I invite us to listen to him and make it our prayer as well. Praying and loving, that is what it means to be watchful. When the church worships God and serves our neighbor, it does not live in the night. However weak and weary, she and us journeys towards the Lord. Let us now call out to him. Come, Lord Jesus, we need you. Rouse us from the slumber of mediocrity. Awaken us from the darkness of indifference. Come, Lord Jesus. Take our distracted hearts and make them watchful. Awaken within us the desire to pray and the need to love. Amen. Amen. So again, thank you for joining us. I'd like to just take a few minutes, not unlike in August when we did the webinar, just to make sure those who weren't there, just to give you a little bit of a background on what we've been doing to date. And then Mark will talk a little bit around the area of the certification, and Harry will go more in depth on what we've been doing in this field so far. So it was actually 4 years ago when, through RESCA funding, the NACC and several organizations kind of pulled together people just to look at pastoral care overall. As you know, the NACC does certify people for board certification for people mainly in the healthcare arena, and the AACCC, the American Catholic Correctional Chaplains Association, had been engaged for years, but over the past several years really had kind of diminished in its importance. So we had to try to think about just pastoral care in all different settings and what was needed. I think we realized that in many ways becoming a board certified with a certain level of graduate degrees and other preparations just would not be as critical as the would not be as critical for us in this process. And so we found ourselves gathering in a collaborative way to kind of look at the various settings where pastoral care is done, and really began to look at how to plan for greater pastoral care work itself. So we did this because we saw there were many diverse settings. We saw there were many requests from people that how do we do preparation in dioceses for pastoral care? And there was really no effort nationally to develop standards and credentialing in this field. Unlike what was done in Catholic healthcare and what was done in religious formation 35 years ago, nothing was done around pastoral care. So many good programs are out there for lay formation in dioceses for working within the church in parish settings, but very little was done for those settings that were more obscure, the vulnerable, prison settings, detention settings, and others. And how do we create a national networking among those that are doing this work? And how do we look at what resources dioceses might need, and how do we provide some national direction? And this was really the effort of this group together that we went about. And so, Mark, if you'd give me the next slide. So our aim was to look and say, where are the needs? What do people need to address those needs? What would be core elements for people doing this work on a volunteer basis or professional basis? And how do we do this together? How do we organize together? And so, again, working with Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition and the partners and ourselves, we are making advancement, and we are anxious to share this with you. So the groups that got together were heads of national Catholic ministry groups, ecclesial leaders. We appreciate the representation at the time of Harry representing the USCCB subcommittee, and Mark continues to stay engaged around it. And we had several representatives from the healthcare arena as well, and correctional settings and diocesan training programs in the midst of this work together. And in fall of 2017, we took the competencies we already had developed and brought it to the USCC's committee, and there was strong information. And we know that what we're trying to do right now and what we'll share with you is kind of pathways, what we can provide for volunteers, what we can provide for people who are doing this with a little more intensity, as well as those who are in leadership roles. So I'd like to turn it over to Mark now just to talk a little bit about the value of even doing this in terms of national certification. Mark?
No, thanks, David. And again, thank you to you and to Harry and Father George and all those who have been involved in this. As someone who's came in the middle of the process, it's been a real inspiration to see such energy and engagement from so many people across the country in this effort, and by evidence of folks on the webinar today, how important this is. So, as David mentioned, with the USCCB Subcommittee on Certification for Ecclesial Ministry and Service being a contact point at our Bishops' Conference in Washington, that subcommittee is sort of the body within the bishops that recognizes and approves standards and processes for forming a range of ecclesial ministers, lay ministers in many areas of leadership, but also ordained chaplains, priests, deacons, and others. And so we've worked closely with NACC, who is one of our approved organizations already. And as they gear up to add these different competencies, and with the assistance of the Partners in Pastoral Care and through the administration of the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition, the USCCB is engaged with this. And it's work that we do not only for obviously prison ministers, but for diocesan programs, for lay formation, professional ministry associations and organizations across the country. It's a wide range of ministry competencies that are addressed through the Subcommittee on Certification. And to sort of orient you to what we do, I have a couple of minutes here of a video from our chairman, Bishop Gerald Kakanis. I'll click on the link here to try to get that going in a minute. But his work with the bishops over these many years, particularly in developing co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord, the 2005 strategic sort of visioning statement of the Bishops' Conference on lay ecclesial ministry is certainly in play here. But I want to share this video as a message from him about the importance of this work. In other words, why do we do certification? Why is it valuable? So I'll click on that, and hopefully you will be able to see and hear it in a minute here.
bishops passed co-workers in the vineyard, it was a clear statement on their part about the importance of lay ecclesial ministry and the need for the laity to take their place alongside priests and deacons in carrying out the ministries of the church. Not because of a shortage of priests, but because of the call of the baptized to use their gifts not only in the marketplace in changing our culture and society with the gospel values, but also in the context of the church. And I think when bishops made that clear statement about the value and importance of lay ecclesial ministry, it was with the awareness that lay ecclesial ministers, like priests, like deacons, need to be well prepared, need to have the competencies and skills necessary to serve God's people. And certification was one way of assuring the fact that people aren't just going into ministry willy-nilly, but they are going in prepared. They're going in ready to respond to the pastoral needs of the people that they will serve, whether it's in youth ministry, whether it's in hospital ministry, prison ministry, whatever, in the wide range of ministries that exist in the church. The call for certification was an awareness on the bishop's part that as we entrust now the work of the church to lay ecclesial ministers, we want to be assured that they are qualified, capable, and ready to take up that ministry.
So you hear there from Bishop Kikanis, I think more eloquently than I could put, just the value that the bishops have found in the need for formation and certification of ministers, lay ministers, again, as a key focus, but not exclusively, particularly in the area of prison ministry, which is what we're talking about here. And there, I think that there are practical and church-related as well as professional aspects to his points about why we are looking at doing this by means of a rubric of certification. It's primarily a credential that will help facilitate access for volunteers and others to potentially gain entry into prison. This may be a need where there needs to be some demonstration of a recognition that the person doing ministry is acknowledged by an ecclesial body or by a bishop or a pastor to come in and do this work. So it's an important credential there. It's a national resource which diocesan ministry programs can also be assured is rooted in an integral Catholic ministry formation. The 4 dimensions of formation that Co-workers in the Vineyard speaks about, which in turn are built upon the same 4 dimensions that the priestly formation and deacon formation are based on, the human, the spiritual, intellectual, and pastoral elements of formation, really help ground a person in that Catholic model of ministry, that Catholic approach to ministry, which is significant and important. And it's a process into which those programs can network or from which they can develop their own programs. So the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition, NACC, has developed a program that can be very readily adaptable to diocesan programs that the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition and NACC can provide a service to dioceses. Those are all important things, especially in the wake of the impacts, financial and otherwise, and pastoral needs that have grown up in the pandemic situation we've been in, and in what will come after. So trying to find different ways to meet that need, that practical need. Again, the ecclesial aspects of why we're thinking about certification, it grounds the work in a document that the U.S. bishops have endorsed and put their weight behind. Co-workers in the Vineyard of the Lord is a basis for ministry formation in a broad sense and allows for the ability to articulate a core aspect of formation that can then be brought into specialized ministries like prison ministry. And it creates an important connection with the entire body of bishops in the U.S. so that we can ensure that the development of these ministries are affirmed by them in the subcommittee's affirmation of these standards. This approach helps sort of make sure that these specialized ministry, prison ministries, but also hospital chaplaincies, other leadership roles, other volunteer roles, campus ministry. All of them are built on proven standards. These have been developed over time by people, by not only by theologians, but by pastoral practitioners to meet the needs of people seeking to be of service to the people of God. And that is ultimately the goal of this. It enables sort of national resourcing for ministers, even at the level of the national church. So we have connections to dioceses. We have an ability through the Prison Ministries Coalition to build connections across the nation and help ensure a quality of formation for those who are seeking to be engaged in this ministry and in this work. And just from a professional standpoint, we speak a lot in the work of prison ministry of the important role that volunteers are going to be playing. People responding to their baptismal call, the call that they feel from God to take up and work with those who are incarcerated, those who are affected by incarceration beyond prisons. And many of those will be volunteers, but even those volunteers, we need to prepare and train them well at a level appropriate to their engagement, especially if they're representing the whole church. They speak, if they minister in the name of the church, if they're recognized by a pastor and a bishop for doing so, we want to make sure that they're well formed to do that. And of course, those who are professionals, of course, bear that responsibility even more. And then this gives people the opportunity to be recognized in the work that they've done. It allows them to connect to others who are doing similar work. CPMC has provided that kind of networking through town hall meetings and through other ways of doing that. But this adds another layer to that. And again, pastors, bishops, prison systems, wardens, sheriffs, they can all be assured through this process that the quality of ministry being provided is going to be at a level not only acceptable to the church, but hopefully acceptable to their needs as well. So that in a sort of a nutshell is the background for why we think about certification, why we take it seriously, why we've spent the time and effort on these activities. So I think I'll pass it back over to David here, who's going to continue talking about other pastoral care emphases and how they fit in.
Thank you, Mark. I found that another benefit for someone going through this is the comfort and confidence one gains.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
That you feel like, all right, now I've got a better grounding in what I'm doing and better motivation. And the other is the connectedness and community, that now
Absolutely.
I'm part of a larger group. And I think when we did the pilot project here, we would talk about, there was a great sense of, wow, as much at times this work could feel like one's alone, there's a great sense of I'm doing this with others, not just in the name of the church, but boy, there's a community of people involved in this together, which I think are also wonderful benefits to being involved in the formation and ultimately credentialing in some form or other. It's more than the badge. It's that comfort, confidence, and connectedness and community, I think, that really are helpful. So as we talked about the overall pastoral care and the competencies, today we're really going to focus more on the criminal justice settings. We realized we had under the American Catholic Correctional Chaplains Association, we had a set of competencies and process, but we really had to try to think through what's best for the settings of correctional. We certainly spent time looking at the migrant and immigrant and refugee and the elder care and home settings with parishes and the faith community. A lot of them gave us a setting and actually helped us even think better about the setting of criminal justice. And one of the things I really appreciate when I think about pastoral care is that, again, going back to Luke 15, he went out to seek the one who wasn't present, and how all of our work is, these are ministering to who oftentimes are invisible to society or are on the outskirts and marginal nature. And so how are we present to them so importantly? So let's focus really on the criminal justice setting here. And Mark, if you could take me to the next slide. And again, as Mark, you've so well described, it really started with the 4 pillars from the co-workers. That was our basis. And we went then taking those general ones and say, what's specific to pastoral care? Then we went further and said, what's specific to prison ministry? And I am so grateful for the work of Harry and Jean Marie Weber, who helped us as we took those competencies to begin to kind of build out pathways based on those competencies. And so it wasn't just saying, gee, what should we teach or what should we provide? It was much more based on these competencies, what does one need? And so really the work around the pathways have been deeply rooted in, and they're always linked to these competencies itself. So if you would give me the next slide, Mark. So again, you could go to this link on our website. We'll send out to you, but you'll find there on the website the competencies to which we're referring. And we'll be getting this set of PowerPoints out to you after this session itself, but they're there for you. They're both in English and in Spanish, and all the materials there in both in English and Spanish for people to take advantage of. So Mark, if you'd give me the next slide. You know, we've had over the past year plus, we're very grateful to the variety of representatives from dioceses and archdioceses to help us kind of think along the way about what to do and how to deliver and what might be most helpful. But we're still in a sense pilot projecting. We really have worked closely last spring with both the Archdiocese of Santa Fe and the Archdiocese of New Orleans on the prison ministry site to test out against the foundational. But I just want to acknowledge and be very grateful to the many dioceses who've been with us all along the way to help us think through what and how to deliver this information. So Mark, if you give me the next slide. So I'd like at this point really to hand off to Harry, who, you know, 2 years ago when the coalition started, just how we've been able to kind of get around this and to launch into the 3 pathways. So Harry, I turned it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, David. Now, it's important that the context of this is the Catholic Prison Ministry Coalition itself. We were founded to promote the ministry to all those affected by incarceration and to recruit, train, support, and empower those called to this ministry. When we were really researching the need for this, it became very clear that many people did feel alone and isolated and needed to find connections. And so we strive to create in addition, we realized there was a need for advocacy, not just the preparation for the ministry. So we wanted to create a more just and merciful criminal justice system, more aligned with the ministry and teaching of the church and the example of Pope Francis. And our role was to address the wider reality of prison ministry today, which honestly, it's mostly volunteer with some hired chaplains doing reentry advocacy and other work. And then to create a national network of those involved in these diverse ministry settings. And you can check our website out. The link is here and it will be available in other places. And our purpose again was to create opportunities to share resources and best practices so we could strengthen the church's mission to advance restorative justice that upholds the dignity of every human person. So that's why we became a partner with NACC and became even more involved in the Partners in Pastoral Care project. And we started a formation committee, which I serve on, to create training materials and a process with NACC as our lead. We took the same 4 holistic approach of co-workers in the vineyard: human formation, pastoral formation, spiritual, and intellectual, so that we could create a balanced approach. Could we continue now? Next slide. And we did it through using these key questions. So for each of the pathways, which we'll share, we wanted to ask, why am I doing this? So the motivation, where am I and who is there? What's the culture I'm called to serve in? It would be different in reentry in a community than it would be in a prison or in a jail or in a detention center. Then how do I represent the pastoral care ministry of the church? So understanding that we're doing this in the name of the church, and how do we best represent the church? Then what is it that I'm doing there? So the whole focus being accompaniment, listening, and presence. And what am I doing there as a religious agent? What are the kinds of things that are needed? For example, sacraments, Bible study, but beyond accompaniment. And then how do I navigate the system? What are the do's and don'ts and relationships? Because it's very important to realize that those involved in pastoral care need to relate also to the staff and to those who run the institutions where we serve, so that we can be really provide a holistic approach. And these are the components. For one, the expectation of the minister, and then that we have content and curriculum, required content hours, a process to assimilate and develop the candidates, and a process for evaluation and assessment. These are the main, and then these are the three pathways. The foundational is really for your volunteer. Your intensive is really for those who are beginning to spend more time with this and want to go into greater depth. And we'll explain a little further as we go on in here, that the intensive will involve a special pastoral care formation component that is somewhat like CPE. And then obviously, in addition to those levels and those pathways, we need one for leadership, those who want to lead a specific aspect of it, or to support all of those who do pastoral care in a diocesan setting, for example. Here's the foundational approach. The scope of practice, are we sure they understand the basics of pastoral care ministry, especially empathetic listening, pastoral care presence, how to assess and be exposed to the diversity of these settings. And the focus, the preparation focus is grounded again in all four dimensions of formation ministry, enough to begin to discern the call to pastoral care. So many of these people are starting for the first time. This pathway has 30 hours with 24 sessions, 6 guided experiences on site, orientation, session guides for each of the sessions, reflection booklets, links to the resources that we mentioned through the webinars, virtual sessions, a final commissioning service, and a certificate. So all of those provide a holistic approach. And these are the requirements. At least 16 hours of formation using our CPMC Prison Ministry 101 with the accompanying reflection booklets. But also clinical preparation. We hope 8 hours of reflection with an assigned mentor and supervisor. At least 6 hours of mentoring in multiple settings aimed to discern an understanding and comfort level, and endorsements, because we want to be sure that they understand if they're going to represent the church, pastor or his delegate, the mentor, and a person from that setting where they're going to serve would indeed endorse them for a complete picture of the candidate. This is an example of one of the modules. You know, why am I doing this? And we covered the topic, my relationship to Christ. Have I discerned why I'm doing this? My call. What role has personal prayer had in bringing me to this, but in supporting me through this, and being sure that I'm grounded in the sacraments? We have the 2 webinars for that particular session, Ministry to the Incarcerated in the Era of Pope Francis, and Jail and Prison Ministry 101, Session 1. And there's a reflection booklet with primary reflection questions to review with the facilitator and mentor, as well as a very clear list of what are the related competencies that we cover in this session. This was the thing that gave me great hope. When we asked the candidates in the pilot from Santa Fe and New Orleans, this was what one of them said. It just gave me the feeling I'm not alone. There are resources to tap into that I don't know about. There are other people who have the same longing to be able to enter into it more deeply. So I can do this job with the Holy Spirit and with all of you, that all the mistakes I make are things I can learn from. Especially, I have all these materials that were sent. I could keep going back to them and saying, yes, that's a great idea. This was someone with much experience. Someone else shared it was really a big gift, because I feel that doing this training actually gave me a sense of community in the ministry and some background before I had to deal with the logistics of the prison system. It helped me to get to the heart of what's it about. And the spiritual grounding and competencies that led the discussion and forced us to focus on God as the facilitator in our work in serving others and bringing us together as a community as we serve together the people we have a privilege to serve. It's been a community building experience, one which brought practically to our services and spiritual grounding, practicality. And I appreciated everyone. And you need to know these three candidates, they cover a range of experience from 3 months to 20 years. So it was good to see they affirm for us the value of this foundational process. So could we go to the next slide? So in the intensive level now, here's where we begin. Intensive is the right word. The scope of practice, we want to be sure they understand more deeply the meaning of the healing ministry and how it's practiced in the Catholic Church and the specific settings. What are the needs in that setting? And then to understand more deeply, who are we serving, and to be prepared to provide that pastoral care in multiple settings. So the focus is further growth in spirituality to motivate and sustain the work, but also more depth of knowledge and skills about who are we serving and what is this context. And we're trying to expose them to multiple contexts so that indeed they have a greater sense of whatever one they choose to serve in, they have a greater sense of where it fits into the bigger picture. Thank you. Next. And this one requires 80 formation hours. The preparation of at least 20 hours of continuing education in pastoral theology, catechesis, evangelization, for example, Bible study, clinical preparation, 1 pastoral care formation program or other clinical pastoral care experience. And that's where the 80 hours come in, with serving in a clinical setting and beginning to work with a facilitator each month for over 10 months for 8-hour sessions. And as well, at least 1 year of ministerial experience with a portion of it in a correctional setting, and at least 24 hours of mentoring in multiple settings aimed to help them discern what's the best setting for me, for my gifts that I bring to the ministry. Once again, we encourage at this level the endorsement of the local ordinary hours delegate, such as their pastor, a clinical supervisor or mentor, and a person from the setting. So we get a good picture of the candidate. The pastoral care component, this is what's involved. It's a CPE-like program, extended following the methodology, goals, and objectives for a CPE accredited unit. There'll be about 10 to 15 participants with the leader to do critical reflection with the candidates on the clinical hours they have. And the goal is to enhance the pastoral care skills of employees and volunteers who are already involved. As we said, 10 months with full participation in bi-weekly 4 hours sessions, 8 hours a month. That begins April 21st and it will go through April 21st, 2021, and will go till January 2022. The payments for that are $75 a month, simply because of the intensity. All right, can we go on now? Now the leadership specialization, the scope shifts again, not only to do the work, but to lead others in service, as well as providing service. So it's a more comprehensive preparation, serves as a faith companion, a group leader or coordinator of service. They helps us identify the specific sacramental and spiritual needs of the population served, and to specialize in an area of population or correctional ministry. So someone might do reentry, someone might focus on prison, someone might focus on jail, someone might focus on detention centers, for example. The focus as well is to apply the contents learned to deepen their sense of spirituality. So not only would they be motivated, but they could help motivate others and be able to be prepared to organize others. The requirements here are a bachelor degree in theology, divinity, and pastoral care or spirituality, or 40 hours of continuing education in theology with a college degree, at least a minimum of 12 semester hours in criminal justice related counseling, psychology, or related field. And we try to be flexible here because there are many people who don't have the degree, but have a lot of experience and a lot of wisdom to share. The clinical preparation, one CPE-like, as mentioned in the previous intensive unit, and then another unit in any clinical setting or another CPE-like program. Here we would hope that someone to be in leadership should have at least 2 years ministerial experience with a portion in the correctional setting. And again, the endorsements is now they're representing not only individually, but they're representing the church in the formation of others. So the local ordinary, this clinical supervisor or mentor, and person from the ministerial section context that they wish to serve in and specialize in. We would want those endorsements. Here are the resources we have. The competencies are now available for these in English and Spanish on the NACC website. We also have links to examples of pastoral care formation preparation on that site in the Partners in Pastoral Care page. We have plans to create the national online trainings and formation. So if you go to the NACC site and look under resources, you'll see Partners in Pastoral Care. I really encourage you to check that page to see all of the resources that have already been developed, including ideas for mentorship. Now I pass to David, who can explain a little more how you can become involved in these.
Thanks, Harry. Appreciate it. Hopefully, and we didn't mention this at the beginning, hopefully those who are participating had gotten that handout prior to this, so that if you got the handout, really everything we've been talking about has been established on that handout as well. So hopefully you've had a chance to kind of look and cover that a bit. And one of the things is we've been looking at this and trying to think about, some dioceses really have a wonderful program in place. They've been doing some remarkable work, and we'd love to get them as, in a sense, leading practices on how to do this work together. Others have, in a sense, some, but in their own words, inconsistent approaches to formation in the midst of this. And others have don't want to kind of reinvent the wheel, and would love to have thinking in place already. So with that being said, we've tried to think about, well, what would a partnership with a diocese look like? And so these are kind of questions maybe for you who are diocesan reps to think about as well. So what level would I need? Perhaps it's simply a general introduction to the program, something a little bit like today, where you could say, here's things you could get, and look at what you already have in your programs and what could be helpful resources to already a strong program, which is great. And that continue to participate in the town halls we've had, and hopefully these webinars from CPMC that have been involved with the last couple of years continue to be good resources for you. So you may have things pretty well in place and you just need a general introduction and say, thanks, I can run with this. But perhaps it's more of an extensive introduction to components of the program, where you would actually like facilitators in your diocese to become more familiar with what we do have in place, so that then you could prepare your own facilitators. So, and in 2021, we will be offering that type of introduction, a little bit more intensive introduction to people to kind of walk through what we have in place. And I must say, for dioceses that already have a good training program, that's wonderful. And so what we're providing here is not so much to replace what you have, but it's more for those that need more support and structure. We've been working on this and really look to work on them with you. That's why we're calling it a partnership. We want to be able to work with you and say, how best can this material be conformed to what you need? A third is really where you would like some initial preparation, where we would help do the training of the facilitators, where we would have, maybe there's 6 in your diocese who would say, gee, we'd like to go through an initial walkthrough of what we have. Where do you link the resources and how to potentially do the foundational program in your own diocese? And so that's what you might want. Another may be where you want us even to do more in terms of training those who would do mentor work. that those who would become mentors would want more training on what does it mean to be a mentor. And I know a couple of dioceses said, we're really just looking for a turnkey program. We would like CPMC, NACC to actually run the foundational program. And we would have our members who are part of it and go through it initially. And then those who've gone through that initial program become, in a sense, the trainers in the diocese. So there's many kind of levels, and there might be others that you think of and how you might want to make this partnership work. So we're very glad to kind of think with you around what's going to be most helpful for the diocese. You know, Mark and Harry and myself have been ones that have been trying just to think this through. And again, through the initial pilot project and through the town halls, we're trying to think through how to best move this forward. Just to let you know, early when we talked about with the USCCB, the NACC plans by fall of 2021 to bring this to the USCCB. So as we look at the spring, we're going to continue to develop out more of the intensive level as well as a professional level. But we already have had a chance to pilot the foundational, which we're very willing to go for. So working with you on helping to train the trainer, working with you on helping to think through how to mentor people in this work, and thinking through the ongoing development of your program. That's certainly part of what we want to do in these any kind of partnerships that you might want to do in the midst of this. So there is, we did reach out to the bishops in mid-August in a letter saying if your diocese wants to be a partner in this work, which again, we'd be glad to give you more information, where as a partner that again is part of the national networking, national resources, these prep programs, special topics, national credentialing, to say, gee, the diocese would want to be a partner. That's one way, in a sense, to become involved in this as a diocese, a partnership. It might be, though, where you would just want to have a link, Mark, the next, you may just want to have someone to connect it to us through becoming a diocesan collaborator or a professional ministry member, or perhaps just as a ministry volunteer, you want to be a part of the process. As we look at this, the foundational level, one doesn't need to be a member of NACC at the intensive level, as we have people move into the pastoral care program itself, because it's kind of an educational formational venture. We would hope we would plan that person to be either ministry volunteer or professional member or student member in it. And as one moves towards broader certification, that would be there as well. But more information will be coming out about all of this before the end of the year to you, but at least want to alert you to the fact that's part of it. But most important here in the partnership is for you to stay connected to CPMC through the webinars, through the town halls. Please, if you haven't yet joined the Catholic Prison Ministries Coalition, please do that. And I know also Father George wants to make sure that you know about the webinar that's coming up in January. So Father George, if you want to take a moment to let people know about that as well.
Sorry about the siren going by. Thank you. Yeah, well, first of all, thank the three of you for such a great presentation of fairly complex material to take in. But for those who are watching, this will be posted on the CPMC website, this webinar, so you can come back and refer to it. And we will also email you the handouts. The webinar that we're going to have in January is going to be on January 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time. And the topic is addressing racism. And that will be with Dr. Chris Pramick from Regis University. So again, January 13th at 1 p.m. Eastern Time, and the topic will be on addressing racism in prison and jail ministries specifically. Oh, also, and the time that we have left, I see we have one chat comment, but feel free to send any questions or comments using the chat feature on the bottom of your screen in the 15 minutes or so we have left in the webinar. Bernie Mullins asked the panelists, he's a prison chaplain in Canada. Has there been any interest from Canadian dioceses in this?
Father George, right, to date, there hasn't been that communication, but it is certainly something we're be anxious Bernie, please contact us. We'd be glad to find out what diocese, and we'd be glad to share the materials that we've had with you as well. I know in the range of those involved in the NACC and pastoral care, we've got many Canadian members, and we've worked very closely with the Canadian Association. So we'd have to find out who's the Canadian Association, that Catholic group that perhaps we could link this to.
Good question. Thank you. And he asks, are we thinking about a concentration on helping previously incarcerated in finding employment after their release? So post-prison training for preparation.
I think one thing I can share, I think those who do reentry work would be the ones who would focus on that, I believe. But I can share with you that even in our pilot, we actually had a former prisoner who was training to be a chaplain. And his contribution to the training was wonderful. So, you know, there is that possibility that a been-in can go back and help others. In fact, I have someone in my family who did that, so does it well. So I do think both apply. The reentry work, those who do that could help, but then also some of them may choose actually to go and be chaplains as well.
I think some of the conversations I've been having with people who have had interest in the Prison Ministry Coalition, you know, say like the real need right now, because we can't get into prisons, is to deal with folks coming in through reentry, through early releases, through other things that are being done right now. So I think that's to recognize the fact that there are so many different needs within this construct we call prison ministries is one of the great benefits of this coalition. And it's one of the recognitions of the fact that there's a lot of need out there, and that we're staging to meet that need through these three levels of preparation as people discern where they might be of best use. So I thought I would just add that to that important comment.
Thank you.
Can you all speak a little bit more to the CPE-like program? Because I know many of our viewers are aware that in order to be hired as a chaplain in most facilities, they usually have on paper CPE or equivalent.
Yeah.
For many people, doing a full CPE program is too expensive or just time prohibitive. We have been developing the CPE-like program.
I'd be willing to talk. First, Father George, thank you for being a part of that task force. We've had, with NACC, we've had two of our CP educators work with Father George and a couple others to kind of design this. Nationally, there are less than a handful of sites that are in federal prison or prison-like settings. And so there's a paucity of places for clinical sites for CP. So what we've had to work at is to look and say, how do we take the structure of CPE, which includes both working in some clinical setting, along with what the CP calls a didactic, or there's the content, and then the third is that critical reflection upon who one is in that setting with a guided professional who's doing that work. So what's been designed with really the lead of this task force is a program that would allow an individual to work in a variety of different potential settings related to correctional ministry. So it could be reentry, it could be working with the families, it could be visiting of jail, it could be working with federal, it could be working with detention. So trying to look and say what setting is possible for that person that they could use in a sense as their clinical site. And then the plan is to have, starting April, the opportunity for, in a month, 2 4-hour sessions where a person is committed to Zoom, right? It's going to be virtual, 2 sessions being led by, again, a clinical pastoral educator, someone who's certified in doing the work itself. And so the one would be doing some clinical work, would be committed to those 2 4-hour sessions. And this would be over 10 months. Over 10 months that one would be going through this process. And we have tried to keep to the components of CP so that it really could become through ACPE an eligible unit for CP. So we tried to keep to the respective hours. But to us, the critical part was because there's so few sites where one can be in settings that there's enough diversity of criminal justice related settings that could count in a sense for the clinical work itself. So that will be launched. We'll be getting out very shortly promo on that. We were looking to have an initial pilot group. We realized though this could be multiplied all over. And so we want to make sure we have the structure in place so that we could make this available in a variety of ways. We saw this as important for that intensive level because it involves a much more extended critical reflection on the site as well as oneself in doing this ministry. And that it would allow for then that kind of credentialing at the end of the intensive for that itself. And some of dioceses might have already in place a program that has the components, maybe. And we want to be able to at least say, I have the checkoff list of things that are critical to this work. Does that help, Father George? Maybe you have other things to add because you were on the task force.
No, I think you covered it really well. It's as we've been developing it, we really have tried to make it something that is accessible for people, understanding financial time constraints and distance. So this will all be web-based online training, and we'll meet in groups and have support groups that way. But it allows people from all around the country to participate together, which we've never been able to do before.
Yeah, good. I do want to make note, Sister Misty from Beaumont had in the chat saying she's just taken over this ministry and they're really looking to have to get the program started. I wanted to make note of it because there may be others who are very similar to that are looking to get a startup program. And so we'd be glad to meet with you, Sister Misty, but there may be others too, where we could have a group would say, let's get started together. And we could have a little, in a sense, a cohort of 3 or 4 dioceses who want to launch this together. We'd be glad to consider that too. So thank you, Sister Misty, for putting your chat out. And as Harry said, we'd be glad to get back to you.
I'd add to that too, David, that Sister Misty, you're not alone out there. There are many others who have reached out and said, I've kind of been thrown into this, either through changes in diocesan staff or other needs. I'm not sure where necessarily to go, or I have some ideas and need some help. There's definitely a great need out there for that. And I think, again, the connections that we're making here and through, really what CPMC has been doing has been great. And I did see chat here from Karen Clifton, our current executive director. Karen, thanks for being on. That she wanted to highlight too that there's a town hall on December 10th from CPMC to discuss ministry specifically to juveniles in detention. So very particular dimension of formation. Again, another area of unique and important need. And so how do we respond to that? And again, just to give thanks and a shout out to Karen, highlighting the fact that although there are 4 men sort of representing us here today, this is not sort of the scope and makeup of the coalition or of the people involved in prison ministry. There is a diverse group of men, especially of women, who have just carried this ministry forward in so many ways. So Karen, thanks for your work, and thanks to all men and women and all different backgrounds who are helping to make this happen.
And one of the things we've been grateful for is that people have been able to express an interest in a specific area, like the juvenile. And so we decided, well, then let's have a town hall for them so they can share their need. We can understand what we need to do. And we have 2 that are working on helping us adapt the Prison Ministry 101 to that setting. What would be the questions that would be different, and what kind of scenarios do we have to consider in the training of others to do that work? So that's been the joy of this, that whenever a need is expressed in the town halls, there's one for diocesan directors, there's one for reentry, I believe, and there's one for juvenile. So any of those would be helpful if you either, Sister Misty yourself, I think should benefit from the diocesan one in particular, but if you know others that you're supporting that do the others, encourage them to participate in them as well. And you can find, they can all be found at catholicprisonministries.org, where that we keep announcing. By signing up, you'll get all the notices about what's coming up.
I do hope those who've been participating look upon this when we use the word partnership, we're serious. That is, it isn't, what we've presented isn't written in stone, and it isn't monolithic. It's tended to be helping us in a conversation. We know through you we'll be able to adapt, and hopefully with you and your respective dioceses, help to kind of utilize what's helpful to you and to put in place what's going to be most reasonably credentialing process that could be of help to you. So it's very important in this that we make that clear.
We learned very early, one size doesn't fit all. So we tried to create the components so they would be available to fit in to whatever process someone had in their own location. So it should provide support.
Yeah, and I just put out here, if any of you would like to be a part of any of the further planning, we'd love to have, if some of you have more expertise in the area of juvenile, or you have more expertise in another area, we'd love to have you part of the planning. We could put subgroups around the specific areas to help us further develop the materials for this as well.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. I think also in summary too, I'd want to say, noticing the comments on the chat, many of the viewers have had many years of experience working in prison ministry. I've been doing it for 30 years, and I must say that it's exciting what you're putting together, because part of the vision of the CPMC also at the beginning was we realized that people are all in their own little silos, separated from one another. We don't know what's going on. We don't have the best practices. We didn't, I should say. We do now. And so this cooperation between the CPMC and the NACC has provided us a wonderful resource for prison ministry. And again, you go to our Catholic Prison Ministries.org website for all the old seminars that we've done, and this material as well, and refer to the NACC website, which we've posted in the chat box for more information. And stay in touch with us.
Yeah. And I noticed, Mike, a couple people have said they're willing to volunteer. Please follow up with us on that. I'm sorry, Mark.
I was going to say, it's wonderful to hear the folks, offering to help. And I think of that like, someone who's been involved in this, 5, 10, 15, 20 more years. You may say, well, certification is not something that I'm necessarily seeking at this point. But, think of, see yourself as the mentor for the persons coming after you. This is such, we've had such a profound sort of, and in the scope of the history of the church, rapid development of lay ministry and involvement of other people in ministry in so many different areas of the church since the Second Vatican Council. It seems long to us, but short in the scope of things. But we're also in the midst of a generational change. Those ministers who came out with the great enthusiasm of the council and have been involved in ministry for decades, reaching a point where they're ready to continue their work, but in a different way, maybe hand on some of what they've given to others. So the idea of mentoring, the work of mentorship is very vital at this time, particularly for younger ministers who need that kind of guidance. And as we all know, some of the unique challenges of working in the Catholic Church, we have to encourage people for the long haul and encourage people to stay engaged. And I think that's where mentorship provides a great opportunity there. Somebody just put in a nice question from William about diocesan priests sharing this within all other parish responsibilities. What opportunities there might be for pastors to look at approaches to prison ministry that engage the parish in more concrete, in very important ways. Parishes near a prison facility or a jail facility. There's just all sorts of opportunities out there.
Yeah, and I would add to that, as a new pastor, I think we have enough on our plates already in some respects, but we have the resource of our parishioners, the lay people of the parish. And so working with them and using the material we've just described, you can begin to have volunteers in your parish come together and think about and strategize how they would want to do prison ministry. And also remember, not all prison ministry means going into prisons. Often it's preparing the parish to welcome people coming out of prison,
Yes.
supportive for correctional staff and the families of both prisoners and staff. So there are many different ways that a parish could get involved in prison ministry without necessarily having to go into a prison itself.
Yeah.
But we have time for maybe one more comment before we run out of time from the panelists.
Well, I would say if you need one thing to encourage people to join, especially experienced people, is to reaffirm what Mark said, that the reason you should be involved in this is not so much for yourself, but as for being a mentor and learning how to engage the next generation in doing this work, because we do need more young people to do this.
Yeah, and ditto on that, Harry. I think about in the pilot project, we had people who brought to the foundational experience their value. And so for them not to go into the foundational, no, to participate in the foundational with others, it just, the sharing of experience across the board it was a wonderful experience. So thank you. And thank you, Father George.
Before we sign off though, I do want to address the last question that came up because it's an important one. And he asks if we're aware of any Catholic initiative to provide ministry to incarcerated Native Americans, because I believe Native Americans are incarcerated at a higher rate than anybody per capita in our society. And we really need to be able to minister to them.
That might be a top of another webinar.
Yes.
Yeah, I think so.
Certainly know colleagues at the Bishops' Conference who are specifically dedicated to working with the Native American community. So there may be opportunity for work, connecting with them to discuss that. Certainly an area that needs to be talked about more.
Good. Well, thank you for that question, and I think we will do a webinar on that topic. Again, thank you all. Thank you, brothers, for the wonderful work you're doing, and thank you all for this webinar. I wish all of you a blessed Advent and a Merry Christmas, and we will see you, God willing, in January.
Thank you. God's peace.
Thank you.
God bless.